Assalamu alaikum fam, hope you're doing well. So as I'm reading the Quran, Surah 7, Al-Araf, number 141, it reads, "And remember when we rescued you from Pharaoh's people, who were afflicting you with the worst torment, killing your sons and letting your women live, and in that was a great trial from your Lord." So here you see worst torment, an affliction, something that you want off of you. When you're afflicted, you want to be rid of that. You're suffering, right? So killing your sons. So I want you to think about, it's like this is reminding me of balance here. You need the male energy around women. And to just have women in this sort of matriarchal utopia that these feminists want, it wouldn't work. It wouldn't have balance. Without men, the world would be very lonely. So when these musicians like Cher and others say, what are men good for? They actually say things like kill all men. They say some of the most craziest things here. And that woke ideology is getting into, the Muslim community, as I've seen, and it's causing some confusion. Now here it says killing your sons. So killing your sons, the Pharaoh is doing that, and it's like a horrible thing, right? Mothers don't want their sons to die. They cherish their children. So that made me think about abortion. And abortion it's almost like human sacrifice. It's something where the people don't even love their own children. They don't appreciate fertility. They rebel against God, and they kill the innocent for the sake of chasing materialism most of the time. And these women who want to have a female utopia glorify the killing of their sons. But here in the Quran you see that Fir'aun, who is a villain, he afflicted good women by ending their son's life and only leaving women. To the feminists of today, that's a utopia for them because they think masculinity is toxic, something to be destroyed, and therefore depopulation. And a lot of the communist atheists, with their one-child policy that they had in China, tons of children were killed with forced abortions. And that is like what Fir'aun did to his people, but in a different way. State-mandated abortions. Instead of telling people to move out of the city and expand across the earth, their solution wasn't to tell them, move somewhere where you have less population, right? It was, no, we're going to drag pregnant women in, and these monster doctors are going to execute and commit genocide onto the children. Okay? And when the Uyghurs are being persecuted and sterilized, the women are being left to live while any chance of children are being culled. So the women are being left behind and the men are not being allowed to reproduce. And this is like another type of hybrid Fir'aun act. So I'm just thinking how the Quran here is saying that, the death of your sons is something awful. And sons, obviously, during the Bani Israel time, they're strong people. They're not freely, they have to do labor. They have to farm. And they were slaves, so they had to get their jobs done. They couldn't just be sitting at home, eating flaming hot Cheetos, being morbidly obese, and collecting a check from the government. These people had to actually break a sweat. They had to suffer and endure. And so they were more healthy and stocky and sound-minded. So losing those is different than losing the men of today who are kind of a lower caliber in some instances. So it's interesting when you look at it, because letting the women live without men and without children and without sons is a form of cruelty. But today you see that glorified. Abort your children. Tell your son he can be a woman. Tell your son to commit sodomy, which makes him sterile, which means he can't reproduce and have children or heirs, which means you have no grandchildren. And tell him to do these acts that rebel against God and to abandon women. It's really interesting when you start to actually look at this and think, who's promoting Fir'aun values today? and who's doing something close to that throughout history. Maybe not the exact same, but the agenda, the dishonorment, the affliction, right? Because you can get people to afflict themselves, right? Today you can brainwash and indoctrinate people into liking their own affliction, liking their own servitude, liking their own abuse. It's like Stockholm syndrome. Instead of having someone on top of the pyramid, direct it, it's more of, the media and Hollywood brainwashing you into doing it yourself. It's just amazing how you see this sort of male hatred growing. Severe male hatred. Okay? There was even a news story, look it up, where a lesbian couple sued a male clinic because they got a boy instead of a girl. Tons of outlets cover that. It just happened like a week ago. Type in, lesbian sue clinic for male son that they put an egg in her. So these lesbians had severe hatred for boys. To the point where they would sue. They don't want sons. They hate boys. Okay? It's really fascinating how the secular atheist occultic ideology that gave birth to feminism has produced so many things that remind you of something that Fir'aun would probably cheer, because he wouldn't have to do it himself. The people are doing it. And it's just amazing when you think about how Bani Israel, the tribe of Israel, felt like that was a trial. Moses is telling them, and remember, you were rescued from Fir'aun's people who were doing this to them. Rescued means that it was not good just to have only women and no men. Right? And for your children to be executed, for your boys to be taken from you. Okay, that was not good. And if Fir'aun is like the government, he's taking away your children. Today, you can see the non-religious groups who are advocating for the government having more and more power over your children. And in communist China, kids who were infected with COVID were taken away from their parents and placed in a Shanghai center where the children were crying alone. They literally took kids away from their parents. So you can see how the lack of respect for God, the lack of mercy, the lack of respect for a mother and their child, it breeds these sort of strange ideologies. My little one just got over Kufi. We're not vaccinated, She had symptoms for 2 days of just a mild cold, and then she was out playing, having fun, and it's over, and she's at the movie theater with her dad. Thank Allah, it was very, very mild symptoms, but I would never tell her to be segregated from me. Sure, she had kept her distance for a couple of days, okay, keep your distance from mommy, but her dad was just hugging her like it was nothing, and we didn't keep any distance at all, because our kid meant a lot to us, and if they're gonna get sick, we're gonna get sick too. And who cares? We're a family. We're gonna stick together. We love our child, right? But here, you see that Fir'aun, he took away people's children. And the atheists today take away people's children. And then you see the feminists who hate men advocating for the government to take more power away from men and more control over the children, the state to replace, aka the Fir'aun state to replace the husband. When you have no men around you, the women are vulnerable, and that's a trial. It's so interesting when you really start just meditating and thinking about what happened then and what are something similar to that of today. Really makes you think. Very cool. What do you think?